Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We'll get started in just a moment or so. We'll wait for a few more people to join us. Thank you for being here this afternoon. While people continue to join, we'll just go over a few housekeeping items. First of all, I'm Mandy Sankuler. I'm your Communications and Field Services Director. And on our visiting vignette today, we'll be joined by Aaron Holm, who I'll introduce in just a moment. You'll note that you are in listen-only mode, so you won't be able to ask your questions out loud, but we do encourage you to type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll try to have time to answer them at the end. And then because this is a visiting vignette, it doesn't run a full hour. We'll go about 25 to 30 minutes today. And now to introduce our guest, Aaron. Aaron has familial hypercholesterolemia, and he's here today to tell us about his journey with that. So we're very grateful that he's on the call. He's an accredited visitor and a chapter president for Chapter 498, Puget Sound in Washington. So Aaron, thank you for being here. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen now so that we can start our conversation about FH. Welcome everyone again. I'm going to go ahead and so Erin, can you just go ahead and tell us briefly about yourself and your experience with familial hypercholesterolemia, because some people may not have heard about it before.
Yeah, well, thank you, first of all, for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here with everyone. I would say, so a little bit of just general information. I live in Issaquah, which is about 15 minutes east of Seattle, right where the mountains start. So I'm, from here, if you go east, you're going up into the mountains. So when it's raining here, it's snowing 20 minutes away. I have, I'm married. I've been married for 23 years. I've got two children, one who's going to turn 18 next month, and another who's 12, and it'll turn 13 in the summer. So obviously the familial aspect of hypercholesterolemia is front and center because, it's in my family. So my background with FH is a little bit checkered. I didn't really know my father growing up, but his line of the family had elevated cholesterol. I didn't meet my grandfather, but I understand he died of a heart attack. But I didn't really know my dad, so it wasn't anything that was shown to me. I learned about my cholesterol when I was about 22 years old, and I was an athlete. I was a volleyball player for the University of Toronto, and I was sort of captain of the volleyball team, and we were one of the best teams in the country. And I had an arrhythmia that was diagnosed and then medicated. So they gave me a prescription to take pills for my arrhythmia, and I ended up in the hospital. I collapsed during a match from taking the medication, and I ended up in the hospital. And then a few weeks later, they told me that they'd found extremely elevated levels of cholesterol. So I was 23 years old, and I just had a very bad episode with medication. And they told me I needed to start taking statins or I'd be dead before I was 40. That's what my doctor's words. And I just shut down, and I stayed away from doctors for the better part of 25 years because I didn't want to hear it. And had such a bad experience with doctors that I just lived with this. My cholesterol was around 400. My LDL was above 320. And so it's clearly inherited and clearly genetic. And I just kind of stacked the deck and said, well, I'm going to stay really healthy, and I'm going to eat well. And I'm not going to go see the doctor because I didn't like doctors for a while. And I just thought I'll be the one who, beats this and toughs it out and does all that. And then 5 years ago, at the age of 46, I had a silent heart attack and ended up having a quintuple bypass. And so, I had some permanent damage, and I had some, incredible surgical process. I mean, a quintuple bypass is a pretty big surgical deal. And then from there, I changed everything. I turned everything around. And I can talk about that more after, but that was the journey. It was initial denial and avoidance, and then a big, big bang on the head, and then a complete recalibration and rethinking of what my health meant to me and what I was going to do about it.
This is not one of the questions we discussed, but knowing that you did, most people are diagnosed much younger because this can be such a dangerous disease. Do you feel lucky that you were able to get to the age of 40 before an event like this happened? Or
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, I had a dark cloud over my head for 20 years. When I made it to 40, I was like, oh, maybe. But when I was younger, like in my 20s and my 30s, I couldn't really see that far into the future. I thought I would die. I thought I would die young. And it was this really strange cognitive mismatch where I had a dark cloud over my head, but I just refused to do anything about it. Like I would not take the pills. And in retrospect, that's a big lesson, because I have kids, right? And my kids are very likely to inherit different aspects of this, but at the same time, it's entirely treatable. So that's one of the lessons that I've learned, right? My cholesterol has gone from 400 to 120. My LDL has gone from 320 to 45. It can be treated, and it's more, and we can get into the other stuff later, but for me, the biggest element of it all was just acceptance. I could not accept for a long time the idea that I was unhealthy because I didn't feel unhealthy. I felt really healthy and really strong. I was an athlete. I ran marathons. But at the same time, what I had done was to build a lot of personality and identity around these ideas of me being strong and being healthy, because at some deeper level, I knew that I wasn't. And that was just the mismatch that was going on in me for a long time that took me, recovering from a quintuple bypass procedure to really, really change.
so when it came to the medication, which has obviously been a huge help with getting those numbers down, what made you make the decisions you made? And so how did you decide your treatment options?
Well, I first of all had to accept that I had an illness, um, which I was for a long time not ready to accept. But in the weeks leading up to my surgery, I was barely alive. I mean, I couldn't walk up 2 or 3 stairs without having to stop and catch my breath. I mean, I was walking dead for the time between when I had a stress test and they caught what was going on. They sent me in for stents. During the stent procedure, the doctor said, "Stents can't help you. You're 100% blocked in multiple locations. Like you're 100% blocked." And he was showing me on the screen, and I was watching the blood like just bang into these big globules and like really beautifully try to make it around and create blood. And I knew that that's what I had been feeling. I'd been feeling like whenever my heart rate came up at all, the blood just couldn't get in there. And so my heart would like grasp up, and then I would have to slow down. And what happened to me was I fought that and denied it for a year or two. When it was happening, I'd be running or I'd be biking and my heart would clamp up and I'd be like, okay, I'll just slow down. I'm getting old, who knows what this is. And then one day I was swimming in the lake and I couldn't slow my heart rate down. I thought I was dead. And so I was swimming and I'm like, I'm going to die. Like I cannot get my heart rate back down. And everything just opened up. I was like, okay, this is a big problem. And I think that's when I had the silent heart attack, is when I was in the lake, because I just couldn't slow it down. And so after that, it was more, there were phases of acceptance. The first phase of acceptance for me was, okay, I've got a problem and I have to completely, shift how I engage with doctors. Like I have to I have a problem and I'm going to need medical help. I'm going to need pharmaceutical help. I can't treat this alone with diet and exercise. So I started learning a lot. I educated myself about, the other aspects of it pharmaceutically, and then also, lifestyle, emotional isolation, stress, things like that, I really started to understand and realize how much of an impact those have on health, particularly cardiovascular health. I mean, isolation, they say, is the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And I was pretty isolated, based on how I grew up and how I'd been raised and how I'd, you know, tried to protect myself as a young person. And, I was pretty isolated emotionally. I kept people very far away from me. I didn't let people get close to me. And I was pretty tough and sort of, a lot of men do this. Men can be very, don't talk about these kinds of things. We don't really talk with each other about our health, or we don't talk with anybody about how we're feeling. So I was very much of that generation and that ilk where I was very closed. And so I was lucky. I had a coach who I worked with throughout this to sort of help me really grow and develop a more healthy perspective and healthy way of living. And then the second one for me was, lying on the lazy boy with my, shirt wide open and my chest cut up and my arm. I had, I've got this guy, which is like a, foot long scar on the arm where they pulled the radial artery. And I'm lying there and I'm realizing that the surgery didn't do anything with the underlying disease. And I'm like, if I don't change, I'm going to be dead or having another one of these not too long from now. Like based on how based on how I knew then that my body actually dealt with the cholesterol, I was like, if I'm reading through it, I'm starting to do the research. I'm like, I'm going to be back here in 6, 7 years. I really don't want to be in another surgery. So then I went vegan. I haven't eaten meat in 5 years. And I really started to appreciate the emotional aspect of it and the connection aspect of it and the need for community and the need for it's okay to be ill, right? It's okay to have a disease and to have a healthier approach to it. I didn't need to fight it so hard. I didn't have to deny it or avoid it. It's like I could just move with it. And so that was a journey, dealing with that. But those were the two big moments. And the third big moment, honestly, was when I learned that my heart was permanently damaged, because they didn't know that when they did the bypass. And so when I was recovering, I was doing really well in recovery. And then I just hit a point where it's like I couldn't exercise the way I thought I should be able to. And I just kept on asking my cardiologist. I was like, I don't know, something's wrong. I don't have energy. I was really low energy for a long time. And I couldn't get back. And so I went and did some tests, and they're like, oh, your heart's scarred. Your heart's scarred, and 3 of the grafts didn't work. So the bottom part of your heart doesn't get, and there's a really crazy story attached to this, but they're showing me, they said, here, you can see there's scarring, there's damage, you're not getting the blood flow there. And I was like, well, that makes complete sense. And then I was depressed for a little while, because that was the reckoning for me was, okay, there's no getting back to normal, right? Everybody talks about getting back to normal. And I was like, there's no normal. Normal's gone. And then through that process, I was depressed for a little while, and then I accepted it. I didn't try to avoid. I fought it for a while, and then I was like, I'm really, there's nothing to fight. It's just, that's where I am, and I can live longer. I've got more life to live, and I can accept, right? I can just accept that this is the condition I have. And then everything changed. Everything changed after that. Because I don't know, I found a lot of grace in accepting where my body was and the condition that I was in, and everything changed. So that's a lot. I don't know.
Yeah. So you had 3 big moments of realization. Were those surprises to you? Like, when you think back, is there one big surprise that you've either learned about the condition, or a surprise you've learned about yourself or your ability to get through this?
Yeah, I mean, I've been writing on this. I write a Substack about this because I just couldn't find anybody who was talking about the actual experience, like what it was like to go through these things. I knew a lot of people who had hit different parts of it, like, in my estimation, surgery, right? Heart surgery is a trauma, right? This is something that they've pretty clearly identified. Like, surgery is a trauma. And most people, when they go into that trauma, just start to shut down. They shut down, they start to avoid the whole thing, and which often leads to depression. That's the one thing that I've been really focused on is just how many people get depressed through this. And a lot of it has to do with fighting and avoiding the reality of the condition. Whereas what I've experienced is in the acceptance of it, you can move in an entirely new way. But for me, that was, I would never have understood that if I hadn't gone through it and experienced the different depths of healing, right? Because the first depth of healing is all this stuff, right? The sternum's broken. This isn't FH, this is surgery. FH is similar though, because you're accepting something that you don't necessarily feel until it's too late, right? So I didn't feel unhealthy until I was very unhealthy. And so the mismatch is you get these test results, and the test results tell you these numbers, and these numbers can be scary, but you don't feel it in your body until the numbers have led to all of these downstream consequences. And then now there's all this buildup, and then it's really complicated to reverse that. It's difficult, and surgery and all these things. So, I mean, that was the surprise to me was how much I learned and how much I grew by sort of healing at deeper levels. Like I knew how to heal cuts and scars and bones and pain, and I knew about those things and I could heal them, but that wasn't where everything was going on. Where it was going on was deeper, right? Which is like actually healing the inside. Because I'll tell you, the crazy thing is I went for a test 2 months ago, just to check up CT, ultrasound, to get, how's the blood flow going. I did a stress test, and the part of my heart that was scarred the last time when I looked at it and I could see the blood flow difficulty in this part of my heart is actually healing. So there's something about the acceptance, right? And this is the part that's beyond the medical aspect of it, which is just the innate ability of people to heal, right? Which is within us, we have this incredible capacity to heal that we can open up to, that is very, very powerful. And that is a powerful augmentation to the other side. And so the numbers that I've been able to get to are, a large degree pharmaceutical, diet, like throwing everything at it because my numbers were so high. I had to do everything to get them down to a level that felt like I didn't have to worry about the cholesterol. So the way I feel about it now is I actually have low cholesterol. So if I have low cholesterol, then the cloud is kind of gone. Right now, I'm like, well, I might live like anybody might live, as long as the graphs can kind of hold, then I can live, and maybe I'm just like anybody else, which is great. And so that was a big surprise to me is to get to that perspective where, maybe the healing had a lot to teach me. Maybe it helped me to like open up and become and really experience life in a much richer way.
You put that so beautifully. Thank you for sharing that. So you've modified your diet, you're taking your medication, you're still getting a lot of exercise. It sounds like you've always done that your whole life, but what does an average day now look like for you in terms of what you're doing to be at this level of health?
Well, I've changed. I mean, I don't exercise the way I used to, because my body actually doesn't respond to the kind of exercise that I used to do. So like pushing myself and, you know, pushing it to the limit, and, really hard workouts and marathons and, basketball runs and all this kind of stuff. I mean, my exercise now is like I hike, I bike, and I do Tai Chi. So, I mean, the Tai Chi has really allowed me to open stuff up and connect it in ways that I hadn't experienced before. Most of my activities before were very like power based, basketball and volleyball and those kinds of sports. And now it's much more about energy and opening and connecting with natural systems that are in the body. So I get up early, I meditate each morning. So I get up in the morning, and I have this room is sort of my little everything room. So I come down here and I meditate, and then I do a bunch of sort of qigong, tai chi activity workouts, which is just to get the energy up and flowing, and to get energy into my fingers as well, because then I write for a while. Each morning I write, and then my kids get ready for school, and so we sort of get together and we see them off, and then I work. And I coach, so I'm coaching a whole mix of people. I coach CEOs, doctors, I coach heart patients. And so I've been coaching a lot of people. I spend a lot of time coaching and then writing. And then I was, when I had heart surgery, I was a CEO of a company which I've sort of moved away from at the end of last year. And so now I do some advisory as well, where I do consulting for folks that are in either technology or housing industry or policy. And so it's a mix of those things. But the morning is the key, where it's each day kind of setting, feeling connected, feeling peaceful, tuning into my breath, tuning into my body, and just being, just being present, being here.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Mhm.
When it comes to high cholesterol or FH, are there any myths out there that you can think of that you would like to dispel today?
Yeah, I thought about this one a little bit. I was just gonna check my notes. I think that there are two that came to mind when I saw the question, or maybe three. I think the one is, it only affects older people, right? So like cholesterol is something that happens to older people. And it's, I think they've shown, definitely in Europe, and they're starting to more now in the States, that if you can intervene with a young person, a child, right, who's been screened and has elevated cholesterol, and it's clear that it's FH, that it's treatable, and that person can have the same lifespan and outcomes as anyone else, and that it's intervention early brings sort of that into a greater likelihood. The earlier you intervene, the better. So that's one, that it only affects sort of older people. And the other one that I learned the hard way was that, if you feel healthy, that you can ignore, the cholesterol side of it, because that's the mismatch, right? And it's everybody has a personal decision for it, but the more you can educate yourself about your health and your how you can navigate it, the better. I mean, it's been shown that if you can keep your numbers below a certain level, the number that I was going for was 150. I wanted to be below 150. For me, that was a number that I'd read widely, was sort of like, if you can stay below that number, you drastically reduce your chances of having a problem. So I was very focused on that number. But I think it's a myth that if you don't feel unhealthy, that you're fine, right? It's just a level where it's just happening at a deeper level. And I think, yeah, and the other big myth is that it's not treatable, right? Like there are, like, it's like I said, I went from not thinking I was going to live to 40 to just about dying, getting about as close as you can get, right? So like really at the edge, right? To like low cholesterol, right? And there's nothing unique. I mean, my numbers, I know other people that have FH, they have numbers like I have, it's genetic to a degree. I think that there's another element to it though, which is the acceptance and the sort of changing of perspective and the lifestyle, which opens up a whole other realm, which is less about managing the numbers as it is about enjoying life. Because that's the other myth about it, which is that it's like a death sentence, right? And that's where a lot of the darkness comes from, particularly where it came from with me, where I felt, and it was largely my own doing, where I felt that there was just a helplessness about it, right? And I was doomed. And there was just, I could do anything, but in the end, I was doomed. And that just wasn't true. So I think that's probably the biggest myth.
Thank you. And we have just a few minutes left. So I want to finish up by asking you, first of all, do you have anything you'd personally like to tell everyone? But also, what advice do you have for people if they maybe have a child that's just been diagnosed, because it is genetic? And so we have lots of members who have little ones that have FH, or if a caregiver has been or a loved one's been diagnosed with FH, or you yourself are going through this, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, I mean, so I started writing on this topic. I have a Substack, aaronholm.substack.com, where I write about this just because I couldn't find anybody writing about the real experience of it. So I write about it. And I'm writing a book called Bypass. So if you go to bypassbook.com, you can sign up. I'm kind of going through the third rewrite of it, and then I'll start looking for an agent. So if it's interesting, you can go and follow along the journey. I think that particularly for kids, what I've experienced, so usually the parent has it, the kid has it. Just know that as a parent, you're modeling everything for the child in terms of how they're going to live with the condition. So if you as a parent, it's the responsibility of the individual, the adult, and the parent to develop a healthy relationship with FH, right? To educate themselves, educate yourself, be in charge of your own care, be in charge of your own decisions. If you're not getting the responses and the attention you want from your healthcare provider, change, right? Develop a healthy relationship with a cardiologist, get what you need from healthcare system, so that you can develop a healthy relationship with the disease, because that's what the kids will see. The kids will watch you, and they'll determine from that whether it's scary for them, whether it's a death sentence for them. If they see you, unable to sort of navigate and avoid and do all the things that are sometimes feel natural but can be dangerous, difficult, then the kids will learn that behavior. And so it's kind of a responsibility from my perspective for the parents to really develop a healthy relationship and do the necessary education and work to find a way to flourish and to take the lessons that the disease has to teach, which have a lot to do with, at the end of it, what it taught me was lessons that I don't think I would have learned otherwise until the very end when I was going to die. So instead, I got to kind of look at those things like, okay, I'm kind of at the edge here. Like, what does it mean for me to be alive? How do I want to be when it's time for me to die? Am I ready, or how do I want to live? And that's kind of the big takeaway for me.
Thank you. Thanks. That was great. We're at time now, but there was one question. I don't know if in your research, is there an average age when people are diagnosed with FH? Do you happen to have know that information?
I don't know. I know that they're screening people younger. I know that, for instance, in Holland, they'll diagnose statins at age of 6. So they found that as early as young as 6, it's appropriate, because in severe cases of FH, people are dying in their 20s. So in severe cases of FH, people are dying of heart attacks in their 20s. And so they found that the younger, and as young as 6, they can intervene and they can use statins and they can adjust, and that those, when they're intervened at that level, even the folks who would have the severe condition, who would die at a very young age, can have regular life expectancy.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. We are at time. Erin, we're so grateful for you being here today and sharing your journey. And thank you, everyone, for
My
being
pleasure.
on. Have a great day.